We good? Welcome, everyone. Please stand and join us with a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Hello, everyone. My name is Amy, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. My sobriety date is May 29th of 2010. Welcome to the 7 p.m. Thursday night meeting, the Treasure Map Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before we start our evening, please remember to shut off or silence your cell phones. Thank you. I'll call you up first. Okay. We send a special welcome to any visitors from out of town. Please stand and introduce yourself. Okay. Also, anyone who may be visiting the Treasure Map meeting for the first time, please stand and be recognized. And finally, if there is anyone here who is at their first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, please stand and be recognized. We're very happy that you came tonight, and you are welcomed here. If you are shy, that's absolutely fine. We do have a welcome table at the back. We have a gift for you. Please come up and see me in the meeting or at the break. Thank you so much. The Treasure Map Group of Alcoholics Anonymous believes in working the 12 steps as outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor. There are many home group members here tonight that are willing to be sponsors. If you are new or you don't have a sponsor, you can stop at the back table during the break and see Randy for names and numbers of home group members willing to sponsor others. The Treasure Map Group of Alcoholics Anonymous celebrates our sobriety birthdays on the last Thursday of each month. Treasure Map home group members celebrate each month of sobriety for the first 12 months and then each consecutive year thereafter. If you would like to make the Treasure Map group your home group, please again see Randy at the back. The current list, I don't know if I have a current list, but we're in August. Doesn't look like, oh, we have three, it looks like, 3 for August for home group members. If you're planning to celebrate your birthday with us and you're not on the list yet, please see me at the break or after the meeting so we can get you added to the list. The Treasure Map Group of Alcoholics Anonymous is committed to bringing a message of hope to those who suffer from alcoholism. We believe this message is contained within the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and our personal experiences. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So our meeting tonight will focus on step 1, kind of. Our speakers, we have Jeff N. from Sioux Falls, then we also have Reid H. from Sioux Falls as well. Announcements. Do you want to come up and read them? You want? Oh, there's lots.
Trying to get organized, right? Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Donnelly, and I'm an alcoholic. So a couple of announcements tonight. Online financial support for the Treasure Map meeting is now available. Reoccurring monthly support is deeply appreciated and helps us fund the group, our meetings, events, speaker costs, coffee, etc., birthday celebrations. For more details, you can talk to Randy in the back or go to treasuremapmeeting.com. Please feel free to take some of our 12-step cards, as some of you have seen those. They're a great way to pass on information about the Treasure Map meeting, but plus you can place your name and your phone number on the back of these cards for anyone maybe looking at assistance at a different meeting that you're at. That way they'll have someone to call. Next week, August 9th, we will be covering Chapter 2 of the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. There is a solution. The Big Book study questions are posted on our website for your review. Go to treasuremapmeeting.com/there is a solution, or there is an icon and a drop down right on the front page. So either way, you can find them. At the break tonight and after the meeting, we will be registering men online for the Bad Axe Men's Retreat coming up this weekend. We will caravan to Camp Wilderness in Park Rapids, Minnesota after the 10 a.m. meeting tomorrow morning at Southside. Sioux Falls attendees are requested to contribute an additional $20 for a Saturday night dinner. However, no money is required. None. Zero is required. Just a request. There is scholarship money still available, so see myself, Michael Donnelly, Scotty, or Randy at the back table, either at the break or after the meeting. But if you're going to come, we'll register you and get you lined up and get you a ride up there. It's a tremendous weekend. We have 2 speakers coming in from California. It's absolutely a life-changing event. So many of you have been talking about it for several weeks. I have brought my handgun. We are willing to register you at gunpoint. Just saying. We're in South Dakota. It's perfectly legal, right? At the break or after the meeting, we talked about that. We'll be registering, so it'll be very easy to get set up. No problem. 2 special events coming up on Thursday, August 16th. That's 2 weeks from tonight. That's after our There Is a Solution meeting. The Treasure Map will be reaching out to newcomers in our area at all groups, all the treatment facilities, all the halfway houses. We encourage all of you to bring newcomers as well. It's our newcomers welcome meeting. There will be refreshments provided, and anyone with 12 months or less will receive a special gift from the Treasure Map group. We will have 3 short speakers describing 3 key principles of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. One is sponsorship, the other is the importance of a home group, and third is the basics of recovery. And there'll be little 20-minute increments, right? So please, if you have some folks that you know, or maybe struggling in Alcoholics Anonymous, or maybe have been around for a little while and are dissatisfied or find some unrest in their life, maybe that would be able to help them. So again, sponsorship, home group, and the basics of recovery. That'll be 2 weeks from tonight. After that, on Saturday, August 18th, it's our first annual Treasure Map Summer Picnic. Be at the Tomar Park Shelter from 11 a.m. to 3:30. There will be out-of-town speakers coming in. We're waiting for confirmation there, but trust me, they will be great. Treasure Map meeting will provide the main course, plates, napkins, etc. Games for the kids and adults. Should be pretty funny. $10 is requested, but not mandatory at all. Bring your own drinks, and people who have an A through M last name, please bring a dessert, an N through Z, a salad, and I believe Shane, who generally carries extra wet naps, you're going to be bringing some of those as well. Shane, is that right? Yeah. Great, thanks, buddy. Thanks. We call him Wet Nap Shane. It's because of those. See myself or Kim D. I don't know if Kim D's here or not, but see us after the meeting if you have any questions there. Also important, birthday night coming up August 30th, and also we'll have a group conscience that night. So those are our announcements. Thank you very much. Look forward to Reid and Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Now, please welcome Dwayne to read how it works.
I'm Dwayne. I'm an alcoholic. This is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorder. But many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all our earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil, until we let go absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures avail us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, thought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed when in order, I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description to the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we are alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could relieve our alcoholism. And C, God could in order for yourself.
Thanks, Dwayne. Thank you, Dwayne. And now please welcome Matt to read our 12 traditions as we pass the baskets. Thank you in advance for your generosity and support. Tradition 7 states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt, and I'm an alcoholic. 12th tradition. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is the desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized. We may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thanks, Matt. We talk a lot about home group membership at the Treasure Map group because we believe it is vital to our recovery. What does it mean to be a home group member? Here's a brief excerpt from the AA General Service Conference-approved pamphlet on the AA home group. Traditionally, most AA members through the years have found it important to belong to one group that they call their home group. This is important, or this group is where they accept service responsibilities and try to sustain friendships. And although all AA members are usually welcome at all groups and feel at home at any of these meetings, the concept of the home group has still remained the strongest bond between the AA member and the fellowship. With membership comes the right to vote on issues that might affect the group and might also affect AA as a whole, a process that forms the very cornerstone of AA service structure. As with all group conscience matters, each AA member has one vote, and this ideally is voiced through the home group. Over the years, the very essence of AA strength has remained with our home group, which for many members becomes our extended family. Once isolated by our drinking, we find in the home group a solid continuing support system, friends, and very often a sponsor. We also learn firsthand through the group's workings how to place principles before personalities in the interest of carrying the AA message. Talking about her own group, a member says, "Part of my commitment is to show up at my home group meetings, greet newcomers at the door, and be available to them, not only for them, but for me. My fellow group members are people who know me, listen to me, and steer me straight when I'm off in left field. They give me their experience, strength, and AA love, enabling me to pass it on to the alcoholic who still suffers." If you're interested in making the Treasure Map meeting your home group, please see Randy at the back table at the break or after the meeting. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Jeff N. as our 10-minute speaker this evening. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Jeff. And Amy asked me to do this last week at this meeting. And what that did, and I'm sure anybody that's been through this before can identify, I went home and I told my wife, and then my brain started running, well, what? Okay, I'm going to cover 35 years of active alcoholism in 10 minutes. And that's very difficult to do. And a lot of it we don't want to talk about anyway. So we'll just cover some of the high points. But so I'm judging by the color of my hair, I look like I could be an old timer, but I'm really not. You know, I'm still a baby in this program. And I acknowledge that. But also, it's given me so much. And I'm talking about step one. And part of when I went home and I talked to my wife, and I'm thinking about what am I going to say? What do I have to share with you guys about step one? And the thing that I thought about is this progression, and if I had been in a place when I was 18 years old, that somebody could have spoken to me in a way that it would have made sense, I certainly qualified. I was fully qualified at 18 years of age. The magic number that I hear people talk a lot about with first experiences tends to be 13, 14 years old. And that's kind of my case too. And it was an indication, maybe some foreshadowing, if you will, of what I had in front of me. The first one was a family wedding in Minnesota, and the basement reception at the VFW open bar. And I'm about 13 years old. And of this huge group of cousins, I'm about on the bottom end of that, and it's open bar, and there's kids clearly not old enough to be drinking that are drinking. And, cocktail right off the bat. And it was like, whoa. And I don't even know what it was. But what it did was it made me part of that group. I was as cool as my older cousins, if I could do that. Well, I remember a little bit about that, and then it lights out. Next thing I knew, it's later that night, my dad's waking me up in the hotel room, and I'd gotten sick. I don't even know what happened. It's not brought up around Thanksgiving or Christmas very much. So I don't even know what happened. But then, so that was first time out to blackout. And the next time, I'm still 13, something like that. And it's a camp out. And we lived in Fargo, South Fargo at that time, right on the Red River. And it was Huck Finn days for me. I had a very carefree childhood, and we had canoes and rafts and stuff like that. And we'd go across the river, and we were building a fort over there. And there was an old abandoned barn. We were building a fort, and we were going to have our first big camp out. One of the guy's sisters old enough, got our list together of the stuff that we needed for camping supplies: Schlitz malt liquor, and Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. And if anybody can remember Annie Green Springs, there was a couple bottles of that too. And that was another blackout. I remember we were running around crazy drunk in the woods, and then I threw up. I remember that. And it's the next morning, laying in a pile, sun's up. I smell like campfire, vomit, and cheap wine. You know, but it was like, and here's the thought that I had of both of those is, it was really fun at first. I don't really know what happened, but I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out how to do this and how to do it right. And then it was fairly mild. We moved to South Dakota, small town South Dakota, where drinking is just everywhere in the little town that I was in. It was part of life, but I did not drink to excess because I started getting older, got into sports, I was into music, had friends, had a car, some success with girls occasionally, you know, so it was fairly normal high school. Couple notable exceptions. Became a junior, and it was time for campus visits. My best friend and I, he's still my best friend, lives out in Colorado now. We piled in the car and we went for a 2-day visit to Black Hill State and Spearfish. It was going to be a 2-day visit, and then there was a blizzard, horrible blizzard that happened, and we had to stay there for a week partying. They put us in a dorm room, so we didn't really have to stay there for a week, but we parlayed this snowstorm and thought, you know, we can't come home. It's horrible. We got to stay here until everything clears off. And that was set. That I didn't look at any other schools because that I'd made friends there already. I already had connections, went to college, and then I got to hurry this up because I don't have much time to talk, and there's 30 years to cover here. And it's not a story. It's really how it unraveled the depth of my lack of power, my powerlessness. And the second part of step one, where my life was unmanageable. And from the time I went to college, it was never manageable again. And I never had the power again. But I identify a great deal with Bill's story for a lot of reasons. One is the first part of Bill's story. When he comes home, he had that little bit of cockiness about him that he didn't know what it was going to be, but he was pretty sure he was going to take over the world in some fashion. And I had that same feeling, and I had no idea how that was going to happen. Didn't think I had to study to get it. Didn't think I had to do any training. It just somehow was going to happen for me. And that was kind of my idea. And one of the jobs that I got was for an advertising agency. And I was professional party guy at this point. So this is a job where they've got a bar right in the office, you know, so it was like, I want to be a part of that. And for the next many years, until, in fact, not that many years ago, I've been chasing that dream. And there's a statement in the 12 and 12 where it talks about putting too much dependence on other people. And that was my big fault, you know. And it was like, I'd be in this deal, this job really sucked, and this guy would go, yeah, but I'm starting up this deal over here. It's going to be sweet. We're just going to, you know, party all the time, make lots of money. I've already got clients lined up. Let's do it. Quit the stable job with the 401k and the salary and vacation and go over here with no benefits, no guarantees at all. And then surprised when it tanked. And then I'm in this horrible place. Now I got to drink twice as hard to get over that son of a bitch that screwed me over. And I went through that rotation a number of times, until it got to the point where I couldn't work for people anymore. The last go around, I was vice president of an advertising agency. Best money I'd ever made. and it was sucking my soul out. It was horrible. And I finally got to the point and I went home. I said, screw everybody. And that was the moment where it wasn't screw everybody, I'm going to go to AA. I'm going to go home and I'm going to start my own business, and I'm not going to be anybody's employer or employee ever again. And I did that semi-successfully for a couple of years. But in the end of that, I'm sitting in my house with the blinds drawn, the lights off, door locked. I'm not answering the phone anymore because I can't pay my bills. You know, things got worse and worse and worse. And you talk about lack of power, and I'm obviously jumping over a whole bunch of stuff here. But I'm standing in the backyard, and I'm not praying, and I'm not looking for any answers. I'm just standing back there going, man, I'm screwed. I have no way out of this, none. And lots of other stuff happened, and with self-employment brought very liberal amounts of freedom for day drinking. And I could get up early in the morning, get all my emails done and correspondence and call people, be at the bar drinking shots by 10 in the morning. And who's to tell me that's not having it made? I thought I had it made until I didn't. You know, and it just got more and more complicated, more and more difficult to do. And one day I didn't come home. And the final blackout, which I hope is the final blackout, came around. I ran into things and ended up in jail. And I ended up at Tallgrass. And I ended up with a mentor named Herb. Herb showed me the book. And anybody that knows Herb knows what I'm talking about. He looked at you and you knew that he meant what he was talking about, way down deep in his heart. So Herb holds a special place, as do lots of people. Crazy thing about this program, I'm just going on 8 years, and I've lost a number of people that have been very important to me in this program. And I'm sure I'm out of time. So I'm just going to finish with this. Is Herb showed me the book, and I believed Herb. I believed there was a way out where I did not believe it before. I didn't think there was a way out, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that was going to be, but working these steps gave me a way to learning about what that higher power is for me and how to connect with that and have that be part of my life. And with that, a little bit of manageability. But that doesn't come on my own. That comes through the people I've connected myself with and my higher power. And one of the people, so I get emotional easily. And one of the other people that I've lost is David B. I sat next to him in room 2 at Southside for a long time. And the thing that he would always say is, I thank God today that I know that I'm an alcoholic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We're going to take a short 10-minute break, about 7:40. If you smoke, there is, I hope, a can out there to put your butts in. Other than that, table back where Shane's at for newcomers, Randy for everything else. Thanks. Oh my gosh.
Right.
I didn't. No. Okay.
Could you do me a favor?
Absolutely.
Give me a 10-minute mark?
Yeah.
Maybe a 5-minute mark
I can
too?
do that.
All right.
I can definitely do that. I'll stand back there. Okay. You got it. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and make our way back to our seats, please. Try that again. All right, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. It's Reid H.
Reid Hall, the alcoholic. It's by the grace of God, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, the people I've met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, found in this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. Good sponsorship and sponsees ain't found it necessary to take a drink or anything else since January 21st of 1988. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Because by all rights, I shouldn't be standing here tonight. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we hear a lot about grace. I stand here because of mercy also. And I'm going to give you a couple of short definitions before I start this. And the first is my definition for grace is getting what I don't deserve, and mercy is not getting what I do deserve. And so I want to thank Mike and the Treasure Mat Group give me this opportunity, this privilege of telling my story, because I really do believe it's a privilege, but I have to say this too, I'd much rather be sitting out there listening to a good speaker than up here, because this is not me. But very early on, after I sobered up, God spoke to my heart, and one of the things he told me is, he says, I'm going to use you as a role model. He says, you're supposed to, and then I started reading this other book, the big book, and it confirmed that too, that God does not do miracles for people just for them. He expects us to show them with, tell them to others so other people can have hope and grow in their faith. And then when I got out of prison, I asked this guy to be my sponsor. And we sat down to work and go through this book. He said, when we're done here, I expect you to do the same thing. Find an alcoholic and help them recover too, take them through this book. And so when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous this last time, I had been beaten into reasonableness by my addiction, my alcoholism, and my drug addiction. I'm also a drug addict. In the last 8.5 years of my addiction was drugs. I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous. I drank 2 times in the last 8.5 years. That's because I was in prison, and I drank something what they call prison hooch. And I got to tell you, it's the worst stuff I ever drank. It's the only thing I ever drank where you got the hangover before you got the buzz. And when I was asked to come here, I really thought it was a privilege. And tonight I was asked to talk a little bit about on step 1. Through the first half of my story, you'll see the powerlessness of what booze did to me, what it did for me, and what it did to me. And I can't blame booze because I had decisions to make in here, and I had opportunities to interrupt it, to stop it. But you see, I was such a knucklehead. There's that quote in the back of the book by Herbert Spencer, and I can't quote it to you, but it goes something like this. There is a principle which is a bar against all arguments, which cannot fail to keep you in everlasting ignorance, and that's contempt prior to investigation. I would not give AA, I would not give treatment a chance. Actually, when I started drinking about 14, by about 16 already, I had formed my plan for life, and it was screw everybody else. I ain't gonna listen to anybody. I'm gonna run my own life. And that almost killed me. I was a low bottom drunk. At one time, I had nothing left but a heartbeat. And you'll know what I mean by that when you hear my story. And so step 1, we were powerless over alcohol and our lives becoming manageable. It took me a long time to see that I was powerless over alcohol. I had about 21 years drinking, and I had a spiritual experience. I did steps 2 and didn't know I did it. And 1 and 2, I should say. And I started reading this book. And when I got to chapter 4, page 44, here is where I found myself as an alcoholic. I could understand that, because when I came in, I had all these preconceived ideas about what an alcoholic was. And I didn't think I was, because I didn't drink every day. I drank every chance I could up until I found drugs, and then I did them both. And if I couldn't find one, I did the other, and they're all interchangeable, just a mess. And usually I did them both on the same day too. But anyway, and it goes something like this, the textbook definition of what an alcoholic is. It says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably an alcoholic. And that would be me. And looking back after getting into recovery, looking back at my life, I can see, I don't know, I started drinking at 14, and I don't know if I was an alcoholic from Jump Street, but it did something for me. I wanted more. And the first time I really drank enough to feel the effects, I was about 14, and I got a pitcher of red beer, and oh man, that felt pretty good. I was able to loosen up a little bit, because I was wound tight as an alarm clock, on the old kind where you got to crank them up, you know. And booze relaxed me. That pitcher of beer relaxed me. And if a little is good, more is better. So that same night, I also got me a pint of whiskey, because I wanted to do it up good. So after drinking that pitcher of beer, I drank about a quarter of that pint of whiskey straight. Why mix it? Let's just get her down, you know. And it was like magic happened. I think of it as my first spiritual experience, because like everything changed, but nothing changed. And I was able to crack jokes, and I was able to be a part of life finally. Up until that point, I never thought I was a part of life. If there was a rule book for life, I didn't get it, and I didn't read it, and I didn't take the class, because I didn't know what to do. And I was able to flirt with the girls. And I had some other issues. I was sexually molested when I was 6 years old, and I never talked to anyone about that until many, many years later. And my dad said, if I tell that in part of my story, he always said to tell this too, so I honor my dad's memory. And what he asked, he said, tell him it wasn't anybody in the family. It was someone outside the family. But so I drank about a quarter of that pint of whiskey, and the magic happened. And I went back and I drank about another quarter of that pint of whiskey, and something else happened. I got sick. I blacked out, passed out, woke up the next morning at home, had no idea how I got there, with a hangover from hell. And that would be the first time out of many times I swore I'd never do it again. But you see, this is what makes me think I'm an alcoholic, because my mind stored this little kernel of knowledge that I gained by getting drunk. Because by about Wednesday or Thursday, I was wrapped so tight again that the thought just popped into my mind, I know what'll fix this. A few drinks will fix this. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous this last time, I heard some strange things. And one of the first things that I remember hearing is that you really don't have a drinking problem. You got a thinking problem with a drinking solution. And it took me a little while to get my head around that. But because the booze did things for me. The booze always did things for me. And they said, if you want what we got, then do what we do. And I took it to heart this last time. And another thing someone suggested, and I started reading this book, is looking for ways that I'm the same rather than ways that I'm different. Because my whole life, I thought I was different. And I remember my first experience at Southside. It would have been 1977, and it was after my second treatment program. And I had to have a sponsor to get out of this treatment program. And the only guy that I knew was a guy named Vince G. Maybe there's some around that know Vince G. And the way I knew him was from my first stint up on the hill, Granite City, because he ran the chemical dependency department up there. And so I gave him a call, and he said, yeah, I'll be your sponsor. Call me when you get out. I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but so I gave him a call, and he said, go to Southside. Go sit in room 1. He knew that there would be a book study in room 1. So I got to Southside, and I got there about a half an hour early because I'm always an early kind of guy. And I get there a half an hour early, and I sat down, and I looked at all you people in there, and I said, I'm not like any of you. I don't fit in here. I got up and left before the meeting started. I'm going to throw this out now. You'll see a lot of good examples of this when I tell my story here, is that I heard a speaker say once that when he was drinking, the solutions to his problems were often worse than his problem. That'd be me to a T. Not only am I a knucklehead, my ideas about the right thing to do never worked. My solutions just never worked until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I started drinking at 14. I got in some trouble in high school. My junior year, I got expelled once or twice. Senior year, I broke the record, I think, for that. And I would have never graduated from high school, but I had a cousin on the school board, and he sent me back to school. And so I was able to get a diploma. After that, I didn't know what to do, but I found a girl I fell in love with. And so I thought to make a career for her and to have a life for her and I joined the military, like many men do, I guess. I joined the military. And, you know, I was so unprepared for the military. Here's a person that don't like having other people tell him what to do, and I joined the military where they tell you everything. And so I enlisted to be an MP because I loved the outdoors. I wanted to be a conservation officer or a wildlife biologist. And so I made it through. I got into basic training, and the first week I was fine. But the second week they took us to the PX to get the haircuts, and I found out they had beer there. Well, I'm sneaking out at night facing an Article 15 so I can go drink beer at the PX because you ain't supposed to go anywhere without a chaperone. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me a lot of things, and it told me what this disease is. It's a threefold. It's spiritual, it's mental, and it's physical. And the mental part for me is, if I don't treat my mind with the action of the 12 steps, eventually I'm going to drink again. And it also tells me I ain't going to have a choice in it. It's going to overcome me. That's why I could have a handful of negative, serious consequences that come my way if I'd take a drink, or I could have a handful of blessings, gifts that would come my way if I took that drink, or I wouldn't get if I took that drink. And eventually, all that wouldn't matter because my mind will focus on just how good it'll feel to take a couple of drinks. But then the second part kicks in, and that is I have a physical allergy to alcohol. And when I take one or two drinks, I don't know what's going to happen. Talk about life becoming unmanageable. I could have the best of plans to do whatever, and you put a drink or two in me, and I don't know what's going to happen. And it's like everything changed, just everything changes. And so I made it through basic, I made it through my schooling, I got sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, and now my alcoholism is just running rapid. I am totally powerless, but if I can make it to formation in the morning and get to my job, I'm okay. Well, then I found out one day that my girlfriend cheated on me. By now we were engaged, and she broke my heart. And by now I'm a violent drunk. It brings out the worst in me when I drank. And so I wanted to go get this guy. And I didn't have any leave time, and there was this guy stationed from back home there. And I need to throw this in here about this same time too. One night this friend of mine come over to the barracks, and I'm a blackout, pass out drinker. Every time I drink, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can count on that. And so anyway, he walks into the barracks this one night and he holds out his hand. He's got some white pills in it. I said, "What are those?" He said, "If you take those, you'll be able to drink all night." I said, "Give them to me." So I took them. They were amphetamine. And so I want to go get this guy that my girlfriend cheated on and with me on. And so we're sitting in the bar and we're drinking, and we come up with a solution to my dilemma. And since I was an MP and a clerk typist in the 508 MP battalion, I worked for the provost marshal, and I typed reports and court documents, and I did that kind of stuff. So we come up with the idea I would break my finger, then I wouldn't be able to type, and then it'd give me an administrative leave and I'd be able to go get this guy. It sounds logical when you're drunk. And so we get dropped off a couple blocks from the barracks, and I lay my finger out like this over the curb, and he stomps on it with his combat boots. And I'm drunk and I'm high, and I don't really feel a thing. And I said, I don't think that's broke. So we get over to the barracks, and we got to do something a little more drastic. So I lay it over the edge of the pool table like this, and I had him whack it as hard as he could with the cue stick. Now it's broke. It's hanging off to the side. Guess what? They still didn't give me an administrative leave. So I had to have another plan, another solution, and the only thing I could come up with was to go AWOL. So I went AWOL, that's really a losing proposition all the way around. And I was gone a couple weeks. I couldn't find them. I come back. I got to go through my punishment, my Article 15. They take my pay and they take my privileges. And so when that's over, I'm right downtown to the bars again, and I'm drinking. And I had all this anger inside of me, and I had no way of getting rid of it until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And through the process of those 12 steps, it was removed by prayer and a 4-step inventory. And so this guy come out of the bar one night, and he just happened to be the victim. And I vented my rage on him, and I ended up, there was a couple other guys with me, but I ended up leaving him for dead. That's the extent of the injuries that I gave this guy, and I'm not proud of this, but that's the person I had become. And I was arrested for it, and I was thrown in a military stockade. And when I was in that stockade, I was in solitary confinement, and all I could read was the Bible, and I was brought up in a good Christian home, taught right from wrong. We prayed together, we read the Bible, we did catechism. In my 18 years of being home on that small farm with my family, I think we maybe only missed church on Sunday 3 or 4 times, and that's because it was so freaking cold, the car wouldn't start, or there was too much snow on the road to get there. And so there's a phrase in the 12 and 12 that says that many times we think of God as a bush league pinch hitter. And that is to say that when I'm in a jam, God, here I am, I need some help, come to my rescue. And I said a prayer to God, and I said, God, if you get me out of this, I'll turn my life around. I'll quit drinking, I'll quit drugging, I'll go back to church, I'll do whatever you ask. And about a month after sitting in that solitary confinement, the feds took the case over and transferred me down to Topeka, Kansas to a federal jail. And I get down there, and about 2 weeks later I go in front of a judge. And the judge releases me on my own PR bond. Now, what do you think is the first thing I do when I got out of jail? It wasn't go to church. It was right back to the bar, because that's what an alcoholic does when he's in untreated alcoholism. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. Thank God for these 12 steps, because they're all about change. And when I got here, I needed to change a lot. When I got here, I was a liar, a cheater, and a thief, and many other things. And when I talked to the old timers and I talked to my sponsor and stuff, those were tools, survival skills for me, tools for me when I was out there in that world. When I got here, they said, no, you got it all wrong. Those are character defects. You got to get rid of all that stuff. And so I ended up getting 3 years federal probation. I went back to the military. Then a year later, I got out of the military and I came back to South Dakota, and I was just run amok. I had 3 years federal probation to do, but there was only 2 parole officers in the entire state at that time, one in Sioux Falls and one in Rapid City. And I was supposed to send in a form once a month. And my self-will riot was, I just lied about everything. I didn't even have a job. I just wrote stuff on there. It looked good and told them how much I was making, and I was traveling the state. selling drugs and partying. That's all I was doing. And so then that went on for about a year, and I got busted the first day of the bike rallies of 1974 at Mount Rushmore. They had a roadblock set up for me. They thought I was going to Hill City to do a big drug deal. And the way I got out of that, someone stole the evidence. But what it did, my PO found out about that, and he called me into his office. And he said, I'm going to give you an ultimatum. You can go do 3 years in the federal penitentiary, or you can go to alcohol and drug treatment. Well, I know 30 days in treatment's got to be a whole lot easier than 3 years in the penitentiary, so I chose the treatment. But you know, my self-will was so strong, I wouldn't listen to anything they said. That quote by Herbert Spencer was really true. I didn't listen to anything, and I got high through the whole treatment program. And the first day out, I started drinking, stuck a needle in my arm again, and it's off to the races. That lasted about a year, and I'm headed to the penitentiary for the first time. And so now I'm beginning to dummy up just a little bit. And so when I got up there, I gave it a lot of thought, and I figured out what my problem was. My problem was I got caught. That was my problem. So I hung out with the older convicts and the safecrackers, the drug dealers. I'm going to try to learn how to do this better. And I used the whole time I was in prison. My time is up here finally, and I'm getting ready to get out, and they don't let me out. There's a sheriff waiting there from the state of Nebraska. Because you see, I've been busted in Nebraska, and jump bond, never went back for court, because that's the way how I live my life. Excuse me, I don't want any responsibility. And I got to tell you, there is no recovery without responsibility. There is no recovery without me inventorying everything that I do. And so I had to go do some time there. I got out there, and it's about a 3-hour drive back to Sioux Falls. And the first thing I did is cash my check and get me a 12-pack. And I drank most of that by the time I got back to Sioux Falls, and I called this guy that I figured would have some stuff, and he did. And this guy amazes me today, because he's one of them guys I swore would never sober up, and he's got 1 more month of recovery than I do. And he thought the same thing of me, that I would never sober up. And so it's off to the races. And I ain't out of prison 30 days, and I'm busted. This time I'm busted for illegal prescription. So I hire a hotshot attorney here in Sioux Falls, and he finds a loophole in the law which says if you're a first-time drug offender, you should be granted treatment. So I'm off to my second treatment program. This time it's up in Minneapolis, which I told you, and I get up there and I gave it more thought. And I'm going to do recovery my way. That was without going to meeting. Well, I went to one, but well, actually I didn't. Vince told me to go to one, and I went to one. I left before it started, so I can't really count that as a meeting. But recovery for me was I was willing to give up the booze, and I was willing to give up the hard drugs, but I wasn't going to give up the marijuana. In AA, we laughingly call that the marijuana maintenance program. It worked pretty good for about 6 weeks. And then this one night, Bob Seger was playing here in town. And you know, I had saved up some money when I was working during that 6 weeks. And so I went every week. I'd go over and get a bag from this guy and go out, head out the door. But every time I was there, he'd cut out a couple lines and ask me if I wanted to do them. And I'd say no, and out the door, I'd run with my bag. Well, this night, my mind told me a lie, and I believed it. And the lie that it told me is, this time it'll be different. This time you won't spend all your money. This time you won't hurt all them people. And my mind said, you know, besides just doing these 2 lines, I'll go to this concert, I'll do a little Jansen, and I'll chase the skirts around a little bit. It'll be a fun night. I did those 2 lines, and I got less than half of the way home, and everything changed. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so I went, got all the money I could, and went back and bought all the stuff I could. What ended that was 22 months later. And I'm standing in, what I like to use the infamous words, all rise. I'm in court again. And this time it's for a drug charge out of Brookings County. I got busted by the white exit. I was going to Watertown to do a drug deal. And I laugh about this sometimes now, but I used to carry everything in a bowling ball bag. Couple guns, my drugs, a scale, and all that kind of stuff. And I make the joke, I'll bet my neighbors thought I was one bowling son of a gun. I must have been in every league in town. because I never went anywhere all times of the day with my bowling ball bag. And so they busted me there, and I had a bunch of drugs on me, and I had 4 felony counts against me. I get bonded out, and I come back to Sioux Falls, and 9 days later, I get popped in Sioux Falls. And by now, I'm a little paranoid. I'm drinking and I'm drugging every day. And I can't drive a straight line when I go across town. I drive a few blocks, and I drive around the block, and I drive a few blocks, and I drive around the block, because I got to see if I got a tail. I used to sit on the top of the hill on Minnesota Avenue there with my binoculars and look at all the unmarked cop cars in the parking lot and write down all the license plates so I'd know if they were following me. That's where my self-will took me. Talk about insanity. And so anyway, I lived in Riverside, and I drove through all of Riverside like that, shooting loops. I didn't see anybody, and I pull in my driveway, and the cops just swoop on me like this. I found out later they got permission to park in my neighbor's garages so they could conceal their vehicles. Oh, anyway. So I'm going to a jury trial in Sioux Falls here, and I get found guilty, and they had me charged with what they call the little habitual offender, which allows them to enhance the class of felony, 1 class of felony, and then a small amount of meth was a class 6 felony, which carried 2 years. If they bumped it to a class 5, it carried 5. And I was working with a psychiatrist at the VA hospital, and I had him in my pocket. And so anyway, I think I was going to get a treatment program again, an 18-month long one, either in Salt Lake City or Denver, Colorado. And then I figured about 3 to 5 years of probation, and I go in for sentencing, and I get sentenced to 4.5 years in the penitentiary. And I think, like, what happened? What happened? You know, I get up to the prison, and about a month later, I find out what happened. Me and these 2 guys went and did an armed robbery together. Well, one of them guys got busted for a burglary. And you know how that worked. He told about the robbery to get out of the burglary. And that's why they didn't give me the probation. And so I filed for a fast and speedy trial. It goes 6 months. They dismiss it. 2 months later, I go back to court in Brookings County on them 4 drug charges, and they got me charged with the bitch again, but they said they'll drop the bitch again if I'll plead guilty to 2 of them charges. So I pled guilty because I knew it wouldn't affect my parole date. That was maybe a good idea. But what they were doing, they were really setting me up, and I didn't know it. Because time went on. I got to be about 100 days short of my parole date, and they recharged me with this robbery. And you know, I had been outside on trustee for 6 months, and I was doing good, wasn't drinking, wasn't using. And I was doing good because I had a purpose. I wanted to try to make my parole. I thought I was serious about staying sober, but that was just a joke, because as soon as they pulled me back inside, I started using again. And they took me back to court on that armed robbery then. And now I had 6 felonies on my record. And I filed a fast and speedy trial. It goes about 6 months. And they come and offered me a plea bargain. They said if I'd plead guilty, they'd drop the big bitch, which bumps it to a class 1 felony. They'd drop the big bitch if I would plead guilty, and they'd give me 10 years. I said, no, that ain't good enough. I sat here all this time. You could have charged me. We should have went to court before. You got to do better. So they came back and they said, we'll give you 9 years starting right now. We'll run it concurrent with where you're at. That meant I would have to do another 6 years. And you know, I told that public pretender, okay, I'll do it. And then I went back to my cell and I got high and I got to thinking about this, and I got what the book calls a resentment. And I couldn't wait to get out of my cell the next morning to call that public pretender and tell him to stick that plea bargain. And he said, if I do, you're the one that's going to get stuck, because they're going to give you life without parole on the habitual offender. And I had some flippant remark to him, like, I'll give him back the change on what I can't do, you know. I thought probably I'd go over to Wall, do something like that down the road. So we go to that jury trial and I get convicted. And then the PO, or not the PO, my attorney says, there's really no defense against this a habitual offender. So let's go in there and plead guilty. Maybe they'll show you some mercy and only sentence you to 40 or 50 years. So I pled guilty and I went in there, and the judge made a statement before he sentenced me. He said, Mr. Holliday, you're a career criminal. You can't and won't change. You're a hopeless case. Therefore, I sentence you to life without parole. And when he told me that, I just went numb. And I think why I went numb was it was anger, resentment, it just bottled up emotion. And a couple weeks later, when I started getting feeling back, it began to sink in. I remember when I got my commitment papers on that, and it had first-degree robbery and second-count robbery with a gun other than a sawed-off shotgun or machine gun, habitual offender, sentenced life without parole. And then it had my parole date. It said none. It said discharge date, death. And I went off. And I began to take my anger out on the people around me, and I began to enforce my values, my principles, my code of ethics, which wasn't much, on the other inmates. And eventually, I got in a jackpot of trouble. I assaulted another inmate with a hammer, and I went to the hole for a long time, and I got out, and I went back to the hole again. When I'm sitting in the hole on this second long stretch, I'm thinking, something's got to change. Something's got to change. AA never even was a thought. God was never even a thought. The only solution I could come up with is a geographical change. Well, how do you do that? You ask for a transfer to a different prison. And actually, that turned out to be a good decision, because I got over to Stillwater, Minnesota, and I told myself, this is a chance for a new start. It's a chance where they don't know you. You can fly under their radar. And you know, it wasn't 2 months, because I am an alcoholic and an addict. The powerlessness of my disease, the mental obsession, took over, and I was back into the same stuff again. Jumping ahead 3.5 years, there came a time when I wanted to quit, and I absolutely could not. I couldn't go 2 hours without getting high. Talk about powerlessness. And I was tried everything I could. And I was talking to this other lifer. By now, I'd been in 8.5 years. He had been in 10 years. And this guy I thought was a bit of an oddball. I'd see him around the cell hall, and this guy usually had a smile on his face, and he was upbeat, and I knew this guy's life sentence wasn't affecting him like mine was me. And that's probably the reason I went and talked to him. And I told him about how hopelessly and helplessly addicted I was, how I tried everything to quit. And he told me, he said, you can do the same thing with your addiction as what I did with my anger. Then he shared with me how he had an anger problem. And one day a guard got in his face, and he brutally stabbed him so many times with a ballpoint pen they gave him life without parole. But he said since then he learned to give his anger to God, and God would take it. Well, when he told me that, I wanted to laugh in his face, and I thought, that's just a crock of BS. And I can't tell you if it was 2 days or 2 weeks later. But this one night, it was New Year's Day night of 1988. I went into my cell that night, and I was willing to try anything. And I prayed to this God I didn't believe in anymore. And I told him how hopelessly and helplessly addicted I was. And I could remember a couple prayers from my childhood, so I said 2 of each of those, and I went to bed. I've been high this whole day, been to another guy's cell, robbed him, threatened him, and yet the next day when I got up, it didn't seem like different than any other day. And by now I'm in this outlaw gang, and the guys in this gang come by the cell, and they said, come on, Doc, let's go get high. And I said, no, I ain't going to get high today. And they just laughed at me, because they'd hear me been saying this, they'd heard me say this for months. But when I said that morning, something strange and wonderful happened. I felt a peace come over me, and it felt like a huge weight was lifted from my shoulders, and there was no desire to get high. If I walked out of here tonight and got struck by lightning, that would be secondary to what happened that morning. And I paced my cell floor that morning because I was so dumbfounded. I couldn't believe I wasn't going down there to get high with these guys. And over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, I tried to lie to myself that this wasn't a God deal, but I knew it was because I said those prayers. And so I believe when a person is ready for recovery, God will put a person in your life to help you. And there was a guy prospecting for this gang I was in, and he had just gotten out of this 90-day-long treatment program behind the walls. And he was serious about staying sober. And so he'd come up to my cell at night, and we'd play dominoes, and he would talk to me what he had learned in treatment. And he told me about some of the first 2 weeks' assignments. And part of it was memorize the first 3 steps. So I did that. Part of it was read the first 5 chapters out of this book. So I did that. Part of it was read the first 5 steps out of the 12 and 12. So I did that. And I thought I was sold out. But I wasn't. I used again on the 19th and 20th. That's why my birthday's the 21st. But I'm reading this book. And when I got to step 3, it said, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to care of God as we understood him. That step scared the hell out of me. So I thought, what will God want me to do? Now, just think about this for a moment. My best thinking got me life without parole, and I'm worried about what God's will might be for me. Then it says step 4 said, made a fearless and searching moral inventory. And I'm thinking, I got to write down every rotten, nasty thing I ever did. And if that ain't bad enough, step 5 says, then I got to go tell somebody about it. And to top it all off, I got to that part in the book where it says, love and tolerance is our code. That meant I had to be nice to people I didn't even like. And I couldn't make any exceptions. I wasn't willing to do any of that. That's why I used again. But I'm glad that I did. Because it taught me what the first 100 people wrote in this book is the truth. The truth will set you free. And so I'm so glad they wrote this down that 70-some years, well, at that time would have been about 40 to 50 years later, it was there available for me because this is the manual on how to live a life of sobriety in recovery. And without this, I would not be here tonight. When I had this spiritual experience, I was thinking about killing another inmate. That's where I was at. And so I was signed up to go to this treatment program, this Atlanta program, and I had signed up for that about 9 months in advance, and God works in mysterious ways. And so I had signed up for this treatment program because I'd been busted for drugs so many times in Stillwater, I couldn't have a contact visit. And you know, a lot of drugs come through the visiting room. And so I get signed up for this, and I had to beg to get into it. They said, why do you want treatment? You're a lifer. You're never getting out. I said, well, I thought it sounded good. I said, well, I want a new life. That was more truthful than I knew. Because 90 days go by, and I'm supposed to go, and I'm not ready. So I told them I can't go. Another 90 days goes by, they call me, I tell them I can't go. Another 90 days go by, and I figure now is my last chance to go. I better get my butt into treatment. So I decide I'm going to go. And about Christmas time, I get a letter saying, no, they're going to continue me now until February. Thank God they did, because I had this spiritual experience in that intervention of time there. And I went to that treatment program. And I didn't know how much fear I had until I was 11 years sober, and I asked this guy to be my sponsor when I got out of prison because I knew there was a lot that I didn't know. And about this book, and guys I knew in prison were getting out and they wanted me to sponsor them. And I thought, gee, I ain't going to sponsor him. I don't know enough. And so I asked this guy to be my sponsor, and he's still my sponsor today. And that's nearly 20 years ago. And I wanted what this guy had. And I would see him at meetings, and I'd see him other places, and he was always helping people, and he seemed to be happy, joyous, and free. And that's what I wanted. And I was 11 years sober, and I did this to the best of my ability, and I went to every Bible study, every church service, and all of that, and that all helped me immensely. But you know, it wasn't until I did a 4-step with the directions written in this book why I found out why I did all those rotten, nasty things that I did. And what I found out is I made decisions based on emotion, and behind it all was self-centered fear. Self-centered fear. And so how did I get from there to here? From being locked up for life? I got about 10 minutes left, so I got to cut this short. But I started, after that treatment program, which I was sold out on that, doing that 4th step, in which I did, and I went in to do my 5th step, and I started talking, I just began to sob. And for 2 hours, I virtually sobbed through that whole 5th step. And after that time, God began to speak to me. And I know today, as I was getting the garbage out, that was God entering in. And he told me some things. He said, I want you to work with kids, I want you to work with old people, and I'm going to use you as a role model. That scared me too. And the first time I got in front of one of these podiums, it was read the scriptures and math. I'm a weightlifter. I've been pumping iron now for about 7 years. I'm big, and my hands shook so bad, I couldn't control them. So I grabbed the podium like this, and then my arms shook like this. And I never knew what it meant to have your knees knocked, but the whole time they were just like this behind the podium. If I'd had money in my pocket, you'd have thought I was dragging a chain or something behind me. And so anyway, I start reading, my voice keeps getting higher pitch, and pretty soon I can't get anything out. It's just crackling. So I regroup a little bit, and I get through it, and a couple of days later, I talk to my aftercare sponsor, and she says, do what I do. Pray. Pray before you get up there. And so there's so much I could tell you, but I don't have the time. God kept doing miracle after miracle in my life. I get sent back from Stillwater, and there's a group called COPE on the Hill, and it's Cons on Preventative Education, and it's talking to kids in groups and stuff. And I'm really involved in the AA, and I'm setting up for meetings. And this is how God works. It's the first time the El Canaire group, that's the prison AA group behind the walls, was invited to an outside AA function, and it might be the only time that it was. I know it was when I was still up there. And 3 of us are going to get chosen to go to this 1989 spring conference in Aberdeen. And when we get up there, before that, we're told we're supposed to tell a little bit of our story and thank the groups for coming in and do meetings. And when we get up there that night, there's only time for one of us to talk. So we drew sticks of gum to see who got the stick. I got the stick. So I tell a little bit of my story, talk about my spiritual experience, thank the groups, and after the other speakers had done this, little guy comes walking up to me and he says, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. I said, well, I'm going to see the Board of Pardons and Paroles next month to see if I can get my life sentence commuted. I said, if you're comfortable with it, you could write me a letter. He says, oh, Gary Colbath, he's a personal friend of mine. I'll give him a phone call. Gary Colbath is the chairman of the Board of Pardons and Paroles. And so they put us in the county jail that night, and I can't hardly sleep. I think, this is pretty amazing. So the next morning they get us out, and I bump into him at the coffee bar, this little guy again, and he says, you know, I've been thinking, I don't know the guy in this state that makes all the decisions, but I know somebody who does. The Lieutenant Governor, Walter Dale Miller, is my first cousin. I'll talk to him about you too. And so I'm going out to talk at schools, and there's this guy named Delbert Peterson from up by where I'm from. And he was 44 years. He was a law enforcement officer in the state of South Dakota, and he was like the cold case, the troubleshooter. When they had a hard case, they'd call him in, and he investigated the robbery. We had a little history, me and Delbert. For years, we played cops and robbers, for real, and he was out to get me. Well, he did the investigation on this robbery, and he recommended I do 20 years in prison. Well, he hears about my change, and he gets me out to talk. And after hearing my story, he calls all of the parole board members asking them to commute my sentence. And I did a video for the Sioux Falls Catholic Diocese on alcohol and drug abuse and sexual abuse. Like I said, I was sexually molested. And when we got done, this guy got done shooting the video, he talked to my chaperone for today, and he said, if it's all right for Reid, I'd like to send a copy of this to the governor. He's a personal friend of mine. And God just kept doing things like this and things like this. Well, I got recommended for 75 years. Now, that don't seem like much of a break, but instead of looking in a cave with no way out, now there's a light at the end of the tunnel over here. A small light, but it's a light. Well, when you get recommended, it goes to the governor's office and he can sign it or deny it, but he has to make a decision on it. After 17 months, he commuted my life sentence. And he gave me this really official document with the seal on it and everything, and it said he thought justice could best be served by commuting my sentence. This is the same guy that said the judge said I was a hopeless case. I had another judge tell me on an appellate brief when I tried to appeal the life sentence. He said he called me a violent menace to society, and I no longer had any value left to society as a human being. That's the type of person that I was. Thank God for grace and thank God for mercy. To make a long story short, after my sentence was commuted to 75 years, I served another 9 years. During that time, I appealed to the commutation board numerous times. Once I was recommended to have the 75 cut to 40, but someone called Crime Stoppers saying I was planning to escape and they threw me in the hole. They did this twice, and that was rescinded. So I had, and finally, in 97, I had a classification hearing, yearly classification hearing. I asked about trustee, and they said, sorry, you got to wait 17 years. You got to see the parole board before you're eligible for trustee. I said, what about work release? And they said, never, because you're a violent offender. A month later, they called me back in and they gave me trustee. I get out on trustee, and I'm out there about a year, and a tornado struck Spencer, South Dakota. And I'm out there this morning, and this guy comes walking up to me, the Department of Corrections. He says, I'm going to try to get you out. I think you've done enough time. He said, if you can make it in our system for 14 years without a write-up, you can make it on the streets. And he's telling me this, and I think, I can't believe this. 2 days later, I got to track him down. And I said, do you really think you can get me out? And he said, yeah, if I can get a recommendation from the warden. And so, he said, I'm this close to having the Secretary of Corrections talked into this. I said, okay. 2 weeks go by, Secretary of Corrections comes to see me. He says, we're going to send you down to Glory House and give you work release. And I said, first of all, he said, it's time you get a real job and start saving some money for when you get out. He said, we're going to give you work release, send you to Glory House. And I knew what the rules were. And I didn't want this guy blowing any smoke at me. And I said, I'm sure you know this. I cannot have work release. He said, I know that, but you go to the Glory House, you do good, and I'll talk to the governor about getting you out. 5 months later, it's December 13th, I'm standing by the payphones there. That's what they got in there for the residents to use. And I think it was the first time I answered the telephone, because it was after 19 and a half years in prison. I was a little bit institutionalized. And I knew if the phone rang, it wasn't for me, because I never even heard it. But I answered the phone. And this lady comes on and she says, is Reid Holiday there? I said, yes, that's me. And she said, can you hold for the governor? Governor would like to talk to you. I said, sure. And the governor comes on. And I'm thinking two things. One is, this don't sound like the governor. I've seen him heard him in person, radio, TV. But I'm thinking, if it is, I'm not going to blow it. And then the other thought I had is this the same person that called Crime Stopper playing a dirty trick on me? And then he asked me two tough questions. And the first one was, he said, why do you think that judge gave you a life without parole? And I'm thinking, alcoholic, drug addict, not learning from my mistakes. And before I can answer, he says, was it because you're a rotten, nasty son of a bitch? I had to say, yes, sir. I said that and the fact I wasn't willing to screw me around on my fast and speedy trial. And then he asked me a tougher question. And I really wanted to lie, but I'm so grounded in AA, I know I can't lie. He says, was anybody hurt in that robbery? I had to say, yes, sir. I beat this guy up really bad. I had pistol whipped this guy numerous times, stuck the gun in his mouth and threatened to blow his head off. That's the type of guy that I was. And he says, this is what we're going to do. I talked to Mr. Bloomberg, Secretary of Corrections, about who deserved a break for Christmas. He gave me your name, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a 10-day furlough to go home for Christmas. He said, you got a wife and kids? I said, no, I got a sick dad. I'd like to go visit him, go ice fishing with my brother. He said, someone from the prison will be calling you. Tell them where you're going to be staying and give them a phone number. He said, after that 10-day furlough, then I want you at the Glory House, and I'm going to release you on unsupervised release. All you got to do is send in a form once a month. Now think about that. Guy, 20 years in prison, alcoholic, drug addict, all these charges, habitual offender, life without parole. I don't even have to have a slip signed at a meeting? That was just crazy, because I was chairing meetings at Southside when I was on parole and signing other people's slips. Well, I'm on parole forever at that time, you know. But so anyway, he said, the reason I'm doing this is you prove you make good decisions and you don't go where you shouldn't. That's because I was following those 12 spiritual steps, principles, which are found in this book. And taking the actions when it said to do something, I did it. Like I said, when I was 11 years sober when I got out of prison, and I asked this guy to be my sponsor, and he took me through this book, and I learned so much more. 11 years sober, I felt like a newcomer. There's so much more I could say, but I'm going to end with one of my favorite passages in the book. It's on page 13, Bill's story. And Bill is talking about when Ebby Thatcher came from the Oxford group and 12-stepped him. Because what I'm going to read is the testimony of my life. And if it works for me, it'll work for anybody. This is what Bill writes. My friend promised when these things were done, that's the action of the 12 steps, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. No matter if I already know God, I'm going to have a new spiritual experience like it says in step 12. Now here's some more code for the 12 steps. That I would have the elements of a way of living, this will rock you, which answered all my problems. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a lot of problems. Like I said, all I had left was a heartbeat. I believe there are no hopeless cases. I don't know what God has for me tomorrow. And I used to carry this chip, but I gave it to my dad. I put it in his coffin when we buried him. And this came to me. I know I'm running over. I apologize. This came to me from a prison guard. It was a token from a treatment program from someplace down south. I think it was Alabama or Louisiana. And he brought this token back that they gave people when they graduated. Because when he saw it, he said it made him think of me. This was a prison guard. He could have lost his job, but he smuggled it into me because he knew me before my being born again, before my conversion. And he knew me after. And the inscription on this medallion said, I ain't what I want to be. I ain't what I'm going to be. But praise God, I ain't what I used to be. So if you don't like what you got, or if you're new, get a sponsor and work these steps. And I guarantee you, your life will get exponentially better. Thank you for this privilege.
Thank you so much, Reid. Let's go ahead and close with Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. You come back, your work is your work.